Hey guys, Asim from Running Guy and welcome back. Today I'm talking about some topics that interest me and I hope that also interest you. I feel they'll benefit your training and just having more knowledge enables you to make better decisions. So we're talking about ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is really a molecule within our body and other living organisms that we share this planet with that allows movement, allows power. Without it we are nothing. So we're talking about that. Also that leads into a byproduct of resynthesizing ATP in one of our energy systems, and that is lactic acid. So I'll be talking about that. Also debunking a few myths on lactic acid. And really this enables you to have a better idea when it comes to doing those threshold or anaerobic threshold sessions. Again, I'll touch on what those terms really are. There's lots of terms that are going around, but they're all talking about the same thing. That is our lactic acid production and how we can train to deal with those levels of lactic acid. All right, so let's go back to ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Now, highlighting triphosphate, it's a molecule that's built up of adenosine and 3 phosphates. That's why it's triphosphate. So that ATP is it's like our currency for energy within our body. We need it. So there's 3 ways within our bodies, 3 sort of power stations that we use, energy systems that we use to keep building and providing this ATP. And those 3 systems are, the first 2 are anaerobic meaning without oxygen, so we can produce or resynthesize this and deliver this ATP, this power, this energy without the use of oxygen. And the other one is our aerobic system, and we need oxygen to resynthesize and deliver this ATP and to produce power and deliver this energy. So let's start with the first one. It's known as the ATP/CP, adenosine triphosphate creatine phosphate system. Basically, that produces the most amount of power. It's a very short burst. It's only good for about 6 to 10 seconds, but it produces a lot of power extremely quickly. I always like to use the analogy of going back to why these systems were developed within our body thousands of years ago, whatever it might have been. And I always say, well, it's like if we're just a bit of a funny story sitting around a campfire with our prime mates and the saber-toothed tiger jumped out at us. That allows us that quick jump to try to evade our attacker and get out of the way. So it's just anything that's very quick, powerful movement. Now, taking that back to forward to today's sporting world, it could be swinging a golf club, kicking a ball, powerlifting, sprinting 100 meters. It's only really good for that initial burst of power, and like I said, it's only good up for 10 seconds. Now, the reason this is so powerful but short-lived is this adenosine triphosphate is actually lives within our bodies, within our muscles, I should say, within our muscle body. Now, it's only about 100 grams in total within the human body, so that only allows us a couple of seconds of that initial quick supply of energy or power. Now, what I should say, this adenosine triphosphate, the way it works to produce energy is it drops one of those phosphates away. So we've only got 2 phosphates. So it's that dropping of that phosphate, that splitting of that cell that produces that energy. Now, in order to continue to move, we need that to turn back to a triphosphate. And now it's dropped 1, it's a diphosphate, it's adenosine diphosphate. So in order to do that, we need to find another way to do that. So the initial ATP-CP, adenosine triphosphate creatine phosphate system, within that muscle body, like I said, it actually has ATP stored within it. So that enables us to have a couple of seconds of that powerful, very fast action within our muscles that contract our muscles and shorten and lengthen them to produce that power. But it's very, very short-lived, a couple of seconds. So to help buffer the length or to drag that out to 8 or 10 seconds, that's when the creatine phosphate that's also stored within our bodies with the ATP enables to drag that out, because that phosphate that comes from that creatine phosphate now goes into making that ADP, that element, that molecule that now only has 2 phosphates. It grabs a phosphate from the creatine phosphate, so now it's back to having 3 phosphates, so it's back to an ATP. Hope that sort of makes sense. So adenosine triphosphate drops a phosphate, produces the power, the energy that we need to for that muscle contraction, but then it's a diphosphate. So then once the ATP that's stored within the muscle cells are out within a couple of seconds, it's able to grab that phosphate from that creatine phosphate that's also supplied within the muscle to go back to ATP. Now there's only about 150 grams of the creatine phosphate stored within our muscles. So with the ATP and CP put together, then we're only got about 8 to 10 seconds. So you think about Usain Bolt sprinting 100 metres and all his mates next to him trying to catch him. That's pretty much all done on that ATP-CP production system. Now the next one that we actually go into is the glycolysis, or what you might know as the lactic acid system. It's when we actually start to break down glycogen that's stored within our muscles and our liver and into glucose. Some of the glucose is already in our blood, and that's also used through a process of a chemical reaction. Again, without oxygen, we do not need oxygen. So again, this is the second of our aerobic systems, and the last of our anaerobic systems, I should say. So oxygen is not needed. Again, it produces energy very quickly. It's only about 1/6 of the power that we got from our ATP-CP, and it also is under limited supply. So if this saber-toothed tiger, we've evaded the leap and we've got away from it, but now it's chasing us. We're running maximal speed, so we don't end up being its dinner. We're now using this lactic acid system, which you may know of. It's using glycolysis to break down this glycogen into glucose to enable us to still be moving very, very quickly. The demand on the ATP is quite high, so we need to deliver it very quickly, and in order to do that we do this anaerobically through this chemical reaction of breaking down this glycogen. Now, because this glycogen is also stored within the muscles, it's readily available, but again, it's only good for a couple of minutes. So it might be, think of a truck runner running 400 metres. Obviously when he first takes off, pretty much anything we do when we first take off, we're using ATP-CP, and then it quickly moves into this other anaerobic energy system where we're able to produce these ATP very quickly. So we're sort of branching between the two. We're always these ATP and this anaerobic system, and also the third, which I'll be talking about soon, the aerobic system. They all work in conjunction. None of them work isolated from each other. It's just a matter of what sort of demand we're under, how quickly we need to move, how much power we need for that sudden burst is actually which one is the most dominant one that we're using the most. Okay, so we've gone from, we've got the two anaerobic systems, ATP-CP, this adenosine triphosphate, creatine phosphate, and then we've got this second one, our second anaerobic energy system where we're breaking down glycogen from our muscles and liver and using that glucose. Again, if you're interested in it, there's lots of fantastic information. It delves quite deep, especially the next stage, the Krebs cycle, where the aerobic system, there's lots of certain steps that it goes through to deliver this ATP. The third aerobic system is probably the most complex one, but certainly look into it if you're interested in more. But obviously I don't want to go into it too deep because eventually I'm leading to the way you can use this in your training. I'm just trying to provide some information I find interesting, and it's a human body, and we pretty much should know how this all operates to a certain level. Like I said, it's up to you again how far you want to take it. So this glycogen stage. Now with this, when we're breaking down glycogen, it gets to a stage where we actually have a byproduct. It is not a waste product, which I'll cover again when I talk about debunking the myths on lactic acid. It's a byproduct of producing of breaking down this glycogen. But it can get used again. It gets resynthesised back into glycogen, into glucose. It can also get, it does also get used by the heart as well. So it's not necessary. It is a byproduct of breaking down glycogen, but our body does actually use it. and it all depends on how fit we are and how adapted we are with this lactic acid within our blood, how well we can and how quickly we can turn that back into an energy source. So that's where the lactic acid comes from, that I'll be talking about further once I've covered the aerobic energy system. Well, let's move on to that now. So with the aerobic system, that means we're actually producing this ATP with the use of oxygen through our respiratory system. It's a slower process. But the beauty of it, it actually delivers a lot of ATP. The second anaerobic stage, glycolysis stage, we're breaking down glycogen into glucose to develop this ATP. It delivers about two molecules of ATP to 1 mole of glucose, whereas in the aerobic stage, when we're breaking down the carbs and fats and those type of substrates or substrates, we are delivering, well, the end total is about 38 ATPs. So it delivers a lot more, which enables us to continue to go for a lot longer, but just not as the speed or the power that we could do in the other systems. So it works really, really well. Like I said, we're always using a combination of all of them, but when you're out there walking, or like me talking right now, I'm pretty much using my aerobic system. And it's like I said, it yields a lot of ATP. We just can't run or well, at a high rate or a lot of power for very long. Like I said, 10 seconds ATP-CP up to a couple of minutes just using the glycogen. The second stage, when we're using glycolysis meaning breaking down glycogen into glucose. And then it does it. So that's our three ways, our three sort of power plans of how we produce this ATP, how we resynthesize it. Like I said, we need it. As soon as we drop a phosphate and it turns ADP, we need to get it back to ATP very, very quickly if we want to continue muscle movement. So that's the three ways that we do it. It's obviously a very small molecule. I have to think how many zeros in volume and weight would actually come after it when you try to put a weight on it. But if you can sort of get your head around, we actually resynthesize as much ATP in a day, in 24 hours, equal to our body weight. So when you think about this thing that weighs, I don't know, like 1,000 zeros, nothing, and it all adds up to say 60, 70 kilograms at the end of the day. That's a lot of resynthesizing of a molecule. So it's quite fascinating. All right, so with the lactic acid, when we start to run quick, so we're mainly aerobic, so we're doing a warm-up run, and then we start to go into our fast runs, whether it be, you may call it anaerobic threshold, lactate threshold. The whole idea of this AT, LT, whatever it might be, it's basically when your lactic acid in your blood starts to rise. Now this threshold mark, if you were sort of doing a RAM test in a lab on a bike or on a treadmill, and they're measuring your lactic acid, as they ramp up the intensity, the speed, the power that you actually have to keep delivering at certain increments every 1 or 2 minutes, because you're actually starting to have to work harder, there's more demand for that ATP. So we start to break down more glycogen, and the more glycogen we actually start to use, like I said, that byproduct is lactic acid. So the lactic acid levels will continue to rise as you continue to increase the power and the duration continues. So they've always used a number of 4 millimoles, so 4 millimoles of lactic acid per litre of blood within the body, because that's generally where we get a spike. So we get a general sort of rise in the lactic acid levels, and then suddenly it ramps up, shoots up really, really quickly. So that's generally where they say, okay, that's about when we're actually starting to produce more lactic acid than what our body can actually clear. So it's going to continue to rise, and if you continue with that, with trying to put out that power, that intensity, it's going to get to the state where you're just going to be forced to slow down. Your body will not be able to deal with that amount of lactic acid within the blood, and it's just going to lead to fatigue. Now, fatigue doesn't necessarily come from lactic acid that's in the blood. It comes from something that's called hydrogen ions. But yes, it certainly will cause you to slow down. So this threshold that we talk about, our anaerobic threshold, is usually when they're talking about when your lactic acid reaches around about 4 millimoles per litre of blood. I've been lucky enough to be a bit of a pincushion in a lab over the years, and I've seen it firsthand, and generally you sort of know when you're there just by your breathing rate, which is another way they can they measure your anaerobic threshold. Is also through gas exchange. So you have the mask on, and they're sort of they're measuring oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide output, and you get a certain point. That there's again a certain point when you're reaching your anaerobic threshold. So you have your lactate building up in your blood, but you also have more carbon dioxide you're having to expel. That's where you tend to start short of breath. That's why sometimes they use this conversation pace, and when you start to be short on words and panting really hard, that's generally means you're actually into the threshold range. For that exact reason, your body is just trying to get rid of more of this carbon dioxide, which is again is a product of you actually starting to work a lot harder and this lactic acid building up within the system. So there's a couple of ways they measure it: the blood itself and the gas exchange. Another way they do it, unfortunately, again, I was a victim of this, I should say, where they actually do a muscle biopsy. So imagine you're on a treadmill, being pushed to your absolute limit. They try and push you to 110%. And this was on a bike when I did it. They've already made a 3 centimetre incision in the front of your quad there, in the rectus femoris to be precise. And then you just fall backwards, and then they go in with these long calipers and grab a bit of muscle belly out. So it's a bit scary, but that is the most accurate way to measure lactic acid, because it's just so direct. There's no 5 or 10% loss in accuracy when you're actually maybe doing pin tests with the old with their measuring the lactic acid, or gas exchange. Again, has a little bit of inaccuracy in it, whereas the muscle biopsy is the most accurate, but obviously pretty scary stuff. So lactic acid, so the threshold, back to the training. Sorry, I knew this would happen. I would keep going off on my little tangents. I'm doing my best to keep you on board, and I'll do a bit of summary at the end. So the lactic acid threshold, anaerobic threshold, is basically where they're predicting that you're reaching this state, say 4 millimoles of lactic acid within the blood, before it starts to do this big rise, this sudden sharp upwards. The whole reason why we try to train around that range is that so our body becomes more efficient at dealing with it, and eventually it's actually going to push that little graph to the right. So it basically means if you're producing 4 millimoles running, let's just keep it at 4 minute Ks, you're producing 4 millimoles of lactic acid, so you pretty much round about that threshold, minus 5 or 10%. If you keep training within that range, doing 5, 10, 20 minute efforts, whatever it might be, eventually you're going to become more efficient at clearing it and not producing as much, because your body has gone through that training adaptation through that stimulus of you training at that range. So now you're going to be able to run 3 minute 45 per K before you hit that 4 millimoles of lactic acid. So now you can run quicker, and basically it means, with less lactic acid, you will feel that you will be doing it better. You will be doing it easier. You're going to be burning, there's going to be more of that aerobic fitness happening, and less of that lactic acid, less of that glycogen being burned. So you become more efficient. So that's why you're able to actually run faster, because they've got a lot to do with you not producing as much of that lactic acid. All right. So so that's the lactic acid. So the other thing I want to talk about is, do we necessarily need to train right at that anaerobic threshold? So again, unless you've had a lab test done, which you would probably have to be, have done frequently, whatever your anaerobic threshold was last year, it won't be the same as this year, because you've either lost fitness or you've gained fitness. So if you do want to know exactly what your anaerobic threshold is, then it's best to do obviously a lab test. Plenty of places around will actually provide that service for you, and then it gives you a more accurate idea of where you should be running at this threshold. But what I'm going to say is, you don't necessarily have to hit that number spot on, as long as you're somewhere around about that mark. So if you worked out that 342 is about your threshold, as long as you're sort of around about that mark, it's going to give you just as much benefit. A lot of that's just, it gives you more structure within the session. I, as a runner, know that if I'm going to go and do a threshold session, then I'll sort of know where it is, and I will try to hit that number, because it just gives me a number, gives me more guidance, and gives me a bit of structure. But what I'm saying is, if you get it a little bit over, a little bit under, it's not necessarily going to make a lot of difference. I think what is more important, that that I speak about with the people I coach is that it's more specific to hit the number that you're going to have to put out on an upcoming race. So if you're going to be running a 10k, a half marathon, a marathon, a 3k, whatever it may be, you should have a pretty good indicator of what your average will be for that race. So 10k, let's again keep it easy, 4-minute average, then I would suggest you go out and run a lot of 4-minute average Ks. It's just being more specific to what you actually have to do on the day, and that's a tough word. Specificity is more important than anything to get that right. But at the end of the day, a little bit under, a little bit over, no big deal. What I'm saying is just don't stress on an exact 341. It has to be 341. It just has to be around that mark. You're going to get just as much benefit from it. So hopefully I've covered that. I'll know soon once I go through this video. Apologies if there's some editing coming up, more than likely there will be when I add some other bits in or take some bits out. That's just the way it goes with this topic, because it's one of those things that can branch off in so many different areas. I love it, I can keep talking about it forever. Okay, so with the lactic acid, there's a few things out there that people talk about that aren't exactly correct, or they're not correct at all. So lactic acid production does not incur any muscle soreness or any pain. So that doesn't, it's not why you feel sore. It's not responsible for DOMS, that delayed onset of muscle soreness that you feel. You've just ran a hard 10k the next day, your calves are shot, or whatever it might be. Again, that's not from the lactic acid. That's just from from putting your muscle fibers through a blender. Basically, all the damage that incurs through the muscle belly, through the muscle fibers, and the inflammation that happened. That's where the soreness is coming from. It's not because all that lactic acid was in your system whilst you were racing. The other thing is, maybe still here, I'm going to get a massage tomorrow. Get a massage, they're very good for you, but you don't necessarily have to get a massage for clearance of lactic acid, or going for a recovery run, or whatever it might be. Or you hear, he's going to go for a run tomorrow to help clear that lactic acid. Lactic acid is cleared, or it's back to your normal resting state levels within 1 hour of finishing a race or a session, or whatever it might be. Resting levels are usually about 0.5 or half a millimole per litre of blood, thereabouts. So yeah, within an hour they're back to normal. It doesn't hurt to go down for a warm down jog, obviously at the end of a race or at the end of a hard session, and it will sort of maybe help it clear it a little bit quicker, just because you're keeping your metabolism up, and you've got your circulation or that flow through the muscle belly, so that will probably help it a little bit. But at the end of the day, within an hour, whether you do a warm down jog or not, it's still going to be back to resting levels. So yeah, so it's not necessarily responsible for the soreness. Well, it's definitely not responsible for the soreness, I should say, and it's definitely cleared within an hour. So there's no need to say I need to do this to clear the lactic acid. All right, so hopefully that has sort of come together somewhere along the line in the whole story. But I'll just quickly go through it more if you can hang in there. So the adenosine triphosphate, 3 phosphates, it drops 1. To produce that power for muscle contraction, and then it has to go back to an ATP because we need that again. So it has 3 ways of doing that, 3 energy systems. The first one, ATP-CP, where the ATP and CP is stored within the muscle belly. It can provide it very, very quickly through the combination of the 2 of them to keep us going, but not for very long, 2 to 10 seconds. With those 2 things combined together. So, and then it goes very, very quickly into using glycogen, breaking that down. Again, that's stored within the muscle belly, so it can deliver it quite quickly. Not as much power as the first one, and again, it has a limited supply. So eventually we're going to be crossing over into our aerobic system, where we're starting to break down, we're basically breaking down the foods that we've been eating. The proteins and the fats and the carbs, and we're using all that's stored within our bodies, within our muscles. It's a slower process to do that, but again, like I said, it yields a lot of ATP, so we can just keep that going forever. And then when we suddenly start accelerating again, we start running quicker, then it's going to start switching more into burning that glycogen, So again, we're going to get that slow build up of that lactic acid. The faster we go, the more lactic acid we're going to be building up. So we'll always branch it between those two. So just just I guess a little bit more information for you to understand what's actually going on there. Again, I did a video on aerobic fitness and fat burning that you'll find on the channel. Just over here, I might put a link to it. So this sort of video sort of can branch off that one as well. You probably watch them back to back. It'll probably work quite well. Watch the aerobic fitness one first and this one second. Okay, so so hopefully you got something out of that. I've also I did an interview recently with Sam Burridge that was received really well. When I looked a few hours ago, I was up to nearly 600 views, so that was a fantastic interview. Excited to say I've got another champion coming on very soon, two-time Olympian for Australia in the sport of running. I won't give away too much, but he's had an incredible career. It's still going. It's an amazing story, and I'm really looking forward to having him on, which will be very soon. If you haven't subscribed, then hit this little logo, business logo up here. Hit that and subscribe, and hit that little bell logo. That way you get notification once I release a video. And always check the show notes, the show description below for links over to some other social media sites and my website. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Not getting a lot of thumbs up, no big deal. I don't necessarily give thumbs up on videos too, but I guess because it's a new channel, I just want to get a little bit more feedback from you guys. Make sure you're happy with it. Put down some comments, whatever it might be. All right, guys. Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye.